Hello everyone, and thank you for joining us today for our presentation on managing projects with SharePoint and Microsoft Project. My name is Kyle and I'll be your moderator for today's event. You'll earn 1 PDU for attending this webinar. The MPUG activity code is shown on your screen now, and we'll show it again today at the end of the session. In case you need to leave early and miss part of the presentation, the recording will be up very shortly after the event today. Members can access the recording the same way you always do, by going to mpug.com, resources, and WebNLearn recordings. Then the event will be the first one on the list. If you have any questions during the presentation, please send them over at any time using the chat function on your GoToWebinar panel. Eric will save time for the questions at the end. I also want to do a quick announcement for our 2014 community survey. If you haven't filled it out already, it only takes about 2 minutes, and it just asks some basic questions about what kind of information you would like us to provide you. The best part is when you complete the survey, you'll get a link for a 2-hour webinar recording that you can claim 2 Category A PDUs for watching. I'll chat that link over to everyone towards the end of the survey, towards the end of the webinar, sorry. We're happy to have one of MPUG's favorite partners, Eric Verjou, present for us today. Eric is the president and founder of the Versatile Company, and he's recognized around the world as an authority on practical project leadership. You may recognize his name from the best-selling book, The Fast Forward MBA in Project Management. At this time, I'll go ahead and pass things over to Eric to get us started.
Thank you, Kyle. We'll just take a few minutes, folks, to transition, and so you can see my happy face looking at you, and I think we're set. So again, thanks, Kyle, for inviting me to participate in this webinar. I want to thank everybody out there for participating as well and joining us today. You can see, Kyle mentioned that I've got a couple of books out. I hope some of you are familiar with them. The Fast Forward MBA in Project Management is one of the more popular books in the project management space, and Portable MBA in Project Management, it didn't catch on quite as well, but I think it's still a great book. So if you're looking for something, actually I'll refer to the Fast Forward MBA on 1 or 2 occasions during this presentation, not so much as an attempt to sell you a copy, but just so you know there's some resources out there that are pretty cost effective. A little background on Versatile. We've been in business for just under 25 years, and we're a project management focused company. We deliver training, consulting, and technology, and our technology focus is all around project management and all around Microsoft products to support project management. My goal today is to make this next 50 minutes super valuable for you. And essentially what I want to do today is help you find that pot of gold that is in your own backyard. And by that I mean SharePoint. Many organizations have deployed SharePoint, but we find that very few are truly leveraging SharePoint to manage projects and build project management maturity. So the goal is for you to not only see that you can manage projects, but to give you a vision for building your organization's overall project management capability using SharePoint, and see the role that SharePoint and technology in general play in that. So you can see that this is the general structure of the presentation. We're focused first on understanding what maturity is and what kind of project factors that we want to encourage using technology, and then we'll address the details of the technology that you're all here to see, which is SharePoint, and I'll make some references to how it works together with Office and Project, and then we'll wrap up with sort of bring it all together. Now, the first thing I want to do, though, is just connect in with all of you. One of the neat things about this technology that we're using here, the GoToMeeting, is that you all are going to be able to participate. And I've got a couple of polls here, and so I'm going to ask Kyle to launch the first poll here in a moment after I just recap what I'm going to ask you. I'm assuming that many of you do have SharePoint, but you may not. So I'm just trying to gain a sense for who's our audience today and how are you using SharePoint. So you'll only be able to choose one answer on the upcoming poll, and first and this is sort of in order of how robustly you are using SharePoint. So you can kind of a scale of 0 to 5, essentially. So Kyle, if you'll post that poll, we'll all get a chance to see and participate in that. So as you take a look at this poll, I want you all to keep in mind that the way that we are going to interact today is sort of a reflection of what, as I mentioned, as we were opening this workshop up, this webinar up, we've been delivering training for over 20 years, and what we find is that the more you can encourage engagement and interactivity in a session, even in a short webinar like this, the better the value is. And so that's one of the reasons that we've built these webinars in and these polls in, and I hope you'll continue to participate in those. I think you'll find that gives you a lot of value. Now, here's the result from the poll, and I find it pretty, actually not surprising at all. So we've got a quarter of the folks out there actually using SharePoint to manage projects, and hats off to you. And 10% don't have SharePoint, and 7% have it and don't use it. Okay, so actually not that big a surprise there either. And for those who are using it, you're using it primarily for document storage. So that's 41%. You're probably the ones that are really going to get your eyes open today because you aren't really accessing the benefit of it. So thank you for participating in that poll. Kyle, go ahead and give it back to me, and we'll keep moving. Okay. And let's see here. So, Kyle, I think you need to make me the presenter, and I'll pick up here where we left off.
I think you just need to share your screen, I believe.
Okay. Great, thanks.
There we go.
Okay.
Yep.
All right, you can see we're a team here on this end. So the first topic that we're going to address then is this overall issue of maturity, and I just really want to put technology and project management technology in context. So I want to start by contrasting project management maturity to this very famous book, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. I think many of you have probably read this. If you haven't, I recommend it. It's really a classic. It applies to every one of us. Covey emphasized 7 behaviors that effective people do on a regular basis, and he used the word habits. And it's important to recognize the importance of consistency in being effective. He didn't say these are behaviors that some people do once in a while and that makes, transforms their lives. According to Covey, the formula for doing the right thing is consistency. Okay, it's you have to do it over and over again. So if we start to look at project management maturity, the next question for us is, well, what are the habits that we want to repeat regularly? Okay? And how do we reinforce those habits? So when it comes to project management, at Versatile, we use the enterprise project management model that you see here to create a vision for how to do things consistently. What is it that we want to do? What are the pieces of the puzzle? And as you look at the pieces of the puzzle, the lowest level here is project management, and that means do you execute projects well? The middle level, program management, refers to multi-project management. Now, program management can refer to projects that are related through a common goal or merely through commonly shared resources. Okay? And so I think a lot more folks are actually needing to practice the latter kind of program management, which is managing multiple projects that share resources. And then portfolio management is choosing among projects. So today, the main thrust of our conversation is going to be around project management maturity, around executing projects well. Okay. So the outer ring of this this model emphasizes people, process, technology, and organization. So the people means that the people that are working on projects, whether they're selecting projects, sponsoring projects, they're the project managers, they know project management techniques. Processes is where we gain the consistency. This is the agreed upon way that we initiate, plan, execute, report on projects. Technology plays a key role, obviously, because technology is the link between the people and the process. If the proper technology enables the people to execute the processes consistently, and of course it works the other way around. The wrong technology really discourages people from using the right processes. And you've probably all seen that, where technology was implemented first and the processes didn't match what the people needed, and nobody used it. So, you know, there's a critical link here that isn't always easy to map to. Now, the last piece here, organization. Organization means somebody's got to own project management. If you want to improve project management in your organization, there has to be an owner. A lot of people call that the PMO. It doesn't have to be a PMO by name, or even it doesn't have to be a group, but there has to be an owner for the process, or the process is really not going to grow and flourish. All right, so we set some context here. That was my goal to initially here, to just set some context. And now let's go drill a little bit more deeply into the context. The project success factors that we want to encourage. So we said that, you know, Covey came up with 7 habits of highly effective people. In project management habits, I'm going to refer to some things that are right out of my book. Okay? And I think that whether you've read the book or not, you're going to find that these 5 project management habits I'm going to tell you want to encourage or make pretty good sense. Every project succeeds when we have a clear goal. Everybody agrees on the goal. Everybody on the team understands what it is. It's and the customers, sponsors, management, everybody sees the goal and agrees on it. We're all goal aligned. Secondly, there's a schedule with clear responsibilities and due dates. That is a proven success factor, and if you lack that, I'm really concerned about your project. Risk and issue management. Good projects manage risks and issues. Okay? Risks are the problems that might occur. Issues are the problems that we have. And both of those require a disciplined method of tracking and oversight. Stakeholder engagement. Here's an interesting thing for a lot of you who are following project management. The PMBOK guy from PMI now emphasizes stakeholder engagement as one of the knowledge areas. So it used to be 9 knowledge areas, add stakeholder engagement, now there's 10. So I think there's pretty widespread agreement that promoting stakeholder engagement, managing stakeholders is a critical success factor. And finally, a strong sponsor-project manager relationship. I'm going to get into this in more detail, but I think this is maybe one of the missing links for a lot of organizations. So those are the habits that we want to encourage. Okay? So we've kind of spent here 10 minutes here setting the context. Let's dig into some technology issues now. So we said technology is critical to project management maturity. And there are a lot of technology choices out there, as you all know. If you're sitting in on this webinar, you're a member of MPUG, you know that there are many, many choices when it comes to technology for managing projects. We're only going to focus on the ones that, A, I understand, and B, that most of you have, and these are related to Microsoft products. So Microsoft Project, Microsoft Office, and SharePoint. Okay? So as we compare these things, I want to do another poll quickly and gain a sense of which that you use right now to manage projects. So as Kyle posts this next poll, what you'll do this time, and you'll be able to select all that apply. So if you use, for example, Excel and Word and PowerPoint as part of your process for managing projects, you can select that. If you use Microsoft Project, if you use SharePoint, if you use Project Online, you can select all that apply. Okay? So let's find out how people are currently using technology to manage projects. Go ahead and fill those in. Again, acknowledging that there's all kinds of technology out there. Most of you, if you're on a Microsoft Project User Group call, you're probably using Microsoft Project, I'm going to guess, and to a certain degree using the other tools as well. We're at Versatile. We tend to be a Microsoft-focused shop, and that's by choice. We think that, and I'm going to show you why we're committed to the Microsoft solutions to enterprise project management. Before we finish today, I think that with this addition of Sharepoint, we've really got a terrific combination now to bring people from low maturity up to very strong maturity. So Kyle, it looks like you're going to post that poll now for us, and good, interesting. Not a lot of surprises here, right? 89% of the people in the Microsoft Project Users Group are using Microsoft Project, okay? And 85% use some part of the Excel, Word, PowerPoint, OneNote, all that, which again doesn't make, there's no surprise there. We're saying half of them are using SharePoint to a certain degree, and again, if you're using it for document storage, that counts, right? And then only about roughly a quarter have moved up to the Project Server, Project Online. So pretty interesting, but that's interesting for me to see, so thank you for participating in that poll. So we'll go back, and this time I'm going to quickly we'll get back to this handoff, and so let's talk about how people are using these different technologies and how they relate to these project management habits and the success factors. And you'll notice that, Microsoft Project, the most popular tool for managing projects of the ones that were listed a moment ago, as you look at the 5 factors, you can see it really is focused on a schedule with clear responsibilities and due dates. And believe me, I can make the argument that if you are effectively using MS Project, that helps with risk and issue management, it helps with stakeholder engagement, it can help with your clear goal, but let's be clear that Microsoft Project's primary purpose is to manage schedules with associated resources so that we get cost and resource visibility as well as schedule visibility. That's really the purpose, and it's a great tool. It's powerful, as you know, but it also makes that power adds the complexity. Okay, so that's where Microsoft Project fits in the technology mix. Now, Microsoft Office here, where again we're talking about Word, Excel, PowerPoint. Office, I mean, I don't know if you call that a project management tool, OneNote, but if you notice what people are using for typically with Office, we're talking about we might use Word to write our statement of work or our project charter. We might use Excel to, a lot of people are using Excel still to keep track of their project plans, but they might use it to track costs. PowerPoint is used commonly to make status reports. So there's, there's a range of ways that people are using these, standard Office tools. Okay, and of course the one that they're not using it for is a schedule with clear responsibilities and due dates, even though actually some people still try to use Excel to do that. Okay, so having said that, let's see where does, I want to again just emphasize it for some of you. If you've got this book, you already know that we have over 20 of these downloadable forms just to kind of underline this point here that you can use Word, Excel, PowerPoint, etc. to try to create consistency in project management. So those are all out of that book that I mentioned earlier. All right. So now we get to SharePoint, and the first thing you have to understand about SharePoint that's different is that it's a platform. The others that we just talked about in the Office suite are really applications, and each of us open that application, we create a document or something, and then we store that document somewhere, whether it's a plan, a presentation, a spreadsheet, whatever. We store that document somewhere, and then we try to share it if necessary. But SharePoint's a platform, and And so as an example, Microsoft Project Server is actually built on SharePoint. It's a SharePoint application. People are using SharePoint to build their commercial websites. So you start to see that it's actually a tool set that is installed that you can interact with. And so it really flips the paradigm of what is the technology here that we're using. All right. Certainly SharePoint was designed to create a set of tools that promote collaboration because they're commonly accessible through a web browser. And even though, and as you saw in our poll, it's most commonly used to store files, and it's great for that. But what I want to show you is it can do a few other things. So let's take a look at what SharePoint can do around the project habits that I'm suggesting that you want to foster. And as you can see, I'm going to tell you can do all of the above, because we start with the SharePoint paradigm that every project should have its own SharePoint site. Okay, every project should have its own SharePoint site, and when you start to see that, and you can just take a quick look here with what you can see here on this home page of a project. This is example project homepage. So I like a couple of things here right away. The project goal can be highlighted, okay? Because remember, one of the success factors we want to reinforce is a clear goal. Well, it's one thing to write it down, but to my experience, if you don't reinforce it, we lose sight of that goal. So I like that my project homepage, I can put the goal up there, and not only that, but I can, once it's in here in this homepage, when I pull up my project team agenda, it'll be there. Any place else I want to put it, it'll be there. So it's an easy way to reinforce a goal. You can also see the timeline there, which I like that. I like the way I can highlight key project milestones on the timeline. And again, I don't recommend putting all tasks on this timeline. If you've used Project and you know how that timeline works, you know that if you put everything on the timeline, it's just a mess, right? But you can be thoughtful and selective about putting the right things on the timeline, and we recommend putting milestones on it. Of course, if I have a long project, I can only add the near-term milestones, or I can start to erase the past milestones after I've crossed them. But again, great project homepage, and I like that. Now, here's a couple of other things that I like about using SharePoint to promote team engagement. So you see that you've got a calendar, and everybody in the calendar, everything in the calendar here can synchronize with the team members' Outlook calendars. So then the question starts to come up, well, now wait, do I use the team calendar to manage my project? Is that what the schedule is? And that's the first thing I'd say is no. You want to, and we'll get into scheduling in a minute, but we like the team calendar simply to create a team calendar that can synchronize that for planning meetings, okay, and that's it. But again, it syncs with individual Outlook calendars, so you start to see that connectivity that Microsoft offers that's pretty powerful. And of course, the other thing that you'll notice just by looking at this home is that, of course, you've got document storage, which is what many of you are already using SharePoint for. So the first question that came in, and I appreciate people go ahead and feeling free to answer the questions. The question is this SharePoint page customized or a default? And this is customized. This is something that we've been building. So what you're going to see here is examples of how to use SharePoint to manage projects. But pretty much everything here that you're going to see is the way that we've come up with to use SharePoint to manage projects. So I want to show you now an example of the schedule. And as you take a look at this schedule, and again, managing schedule is incredibly important. This might look like an Excel spreadsheet, but it's not. It's actually a simple table in SharePoint that's easier, in my opinion, to use than an Excel table. One of the things I like about it now, and I'm not showing you in this example, but if you've assigned something to anybody in these tasks, well, that's actually that can show up in their Outlook, right? So that's a task sync that shows up in their Outlook if they want it. So you don't get that in Excel. So this synchronization that you get in SharePoint makes managing the schedule much more powerful. But let's take a look at this too. Again, this is the kind of thing that a lot of people have in Excel, and you can certainly do it in SharePoint. But wouldn't you rather have this? I know I would. And this is, again, it's available in SharePoint, this schedule. And of course, there's a few things that we'd recommend you do to make it be more valuable. But as you shift from having that list of tasks that you had in Excel and on a table to seeing this, to me, that's the difference between task management and project management. As soon as I can visualize the schedule, I can start to quickly see the big picture. Now, again, I want to emphasize what I said a minute ago, that you have to think carefully about how you summarize the schedule and the timeline, but there's a way to do that. I also want to emphasize how this encourages team collaboration. One of my pet peeves is when the project manager is the only one that really deals with the project plan. They've got MS Project on their desktop. They're the ones that's doing all the manipulation, and the rest of the team doesn't always see it very often, or they have to ask for it, or they can't really update their own work. So here's an opportunity using the SharePoint approach where somebody's looking at this task here, and they click on it, they open it up, and they can tell you what % complete it is. They can put notes in the description field. They can change the due date. I mean, they can, this really promotes collaboration because all the people can share in managing the project. Okay, so I like that about SharePoint. And what you're going to hear me say over and over again is I really like this about SharePoint. We have not really, at Versatile, we did not commit to a SharePoint for project management approach until this year. And this answers one of the questions that's coming in. There's a question coming in, said, is there a particular version of SharePoint and or Office required to enable these features? Can different people use different versions? Great questions. This feature that you've seen right in front of you, this cool schedule, I'm going to roll back a little bit. This cool schedule is only available in SharePoint 2013. There is a schedule in 2010, in SharePoint 2010. It's not quite this useful. It's useful, but not quite this useful. All right. So this is a step up. In terms of integrating with different versions of Office and can different people use that, I think that you don't need to have all the people on the same platforms, but I think if you're going to use if you're going to use SharePoint, well, I know for a fact that I've integrated my own Outlook, which was Office 2010 up until recently, with SharePoint 2013. So yeah, there's a lot more interchangeability, and it's not quite as locked down as you might be concerned. So good question. Thanks for asking that, Jim. All right. So as I said, we can encourage team collaboration. So there's another piece that I like about project using SharePoint, and again, it's to promote consistent practice. So here's our home page again, but you'll notice over here we've got this, that's your navigation bar, for lack of a better word, and what that means is what is it that you want to do in your project? Well, this is actually what I want everybody to do. I want them to manage costs. I want them to manage schedule. I want them to have clear goals. I want them to do risk and issue management. I want to promote team engagement. And so by having this common set of standard project templates, which is easy to do once I've built my basic template in SharePoint, once I've built my basic project management set of templates, now every time somebody opens up a new project, they're getting this approach to managing projects. And so let's take a look at specifically at, say, issues and risks and how we can promote correct practices in issues and risks by using SharePoint. What you'll see here, we put together an issue list. Now, everything that you see here is coming right out of the way that we teach it, out of our courses and out of my book and so on. So we've customized this to say these are the categories that you want. These are the columns you want. Every issue should have a name. It should be assigned to somebody. And you can see in my example here, I've just got it assigned to the team, but in fact, I would assign it to an individual person. We should be able to categorize the priority the issue status, and I want to know when it was found and what's the due date, because issues should have due dates, right? And when does this thing need to be resolved or it becomes a real problem? Now, let's take a look at this. You see this blue bar here that says View Entries, and this is one of the things that I think people are missing out on when they don't use SharePoint for issue management. Because if I want to drill into this issue, what I get here, where it says under View Entries, what I actually get is I can get a record of what actually happened there. So I've got this, a series of descriptions that are date marked with when did the what did we do and when did we do it. And so when I'm trying to manage issues, that is exactly what I want to have. I want to see not just what the issue is, but what we've been doing about it. So you're going to see here, as I said on the top of the slide here, we don't want to just promote issue management. We want to promote the best practices in issue management. And I think you can do that when you set it up this way. Okay, let's take a look at promoting good risk management. Risk management is important because when we actively, there's an old saying, if you don't actively manage risks, if you don't actively attack risks, I should say, if you don't actively attack risks, risk will actively attack you. So if you want to promote good risk management, here's the information that I want you to capture. Okay, and you can see the risk name, and you can see who it's assigned to. You can see the status, the due date. Now you look at priority, probability, and impact. And this is something that is important in risk management. This is why you use a little bit of a different format to track risks than issues, because the thing about a risk is it might happen, right? And so how do we come up with the priority? How do we come up with the probability and the impact? And those are important pieces. Well, if I'm using the SharePoint approach here, I can actually load into it some coaching so that people can act, when they want to know how are we calculating our priority or what's the priority that they should enter, there's a priority matrix, and so they just click on when they're entering a risk, there's a place to just say I need some help with coming up with setting my priority, and they get this window. So that'll tell them, oh, here's how to assess probability and impact, and once you've done that, here's how to put your priority. So if I want to have priority on a scale of 1 to 5, how do I figure out what's a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5? And there's a little bit of built-in coaching for them. So one of the things that we've done as we've built this approach to SharePoint that we're promoting is we've tried to build in as much coaching in all of these views as possible so that we get the best practice, because we're trying to build project management maturity, which is consistency of the right practice. So let's take a look at another critical factor in project management, and that is the project manager-sponsor relationship. As I said, I would consider that to be one of the top 5 success factors for projects. And if I'm going to implement any kind of project management practice, I want to implement one that's going to promote a strong project manager-sponsor relationship. We've got one more poll here to ask you about how you view sponsors. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about what I think about sponsors, but we're going to open up a poll here in a minute. And the question in the poll is, I want you to do, this is just a choose all that apply. The project sponsor, do they have more formal authority than the project manager? Is accountable for project success? Champions the project? Removes organizational obstacles for the project? Provides project funding? So Kyle's going to put this poll up, and I just want you to check all the boxes that you say, yes, this is the definition of a sponsor. This is the definition of sponsor responsibility. And we'll see if we get any agreement on from the group here on project responsibility or sponsor responsibility. And the reason that I'm kind of pushing on this is that as I go from company to company, I don't see consistency around this understanding of sponsorship. And I like to highlight that. So as you take the poll, and I appreciate you all taking that poll, what we'll do is we'll see kind of where do we agree on some of this responsibility of project sponsors. Okay. Okay, well, there you go. Kyle is going to show us the answer here. So here's the interesting thing, and I want to comment on this a little bit, and I'll comment on why I see different perspectives on sponsorship, and I'll give you my own perspective on what sponsorship should be. So the project sponsor, the first question is, has more formal authority than the project manager. Again, I'm going to tell you that the classic reason that we need a project sponsor is that project managers do not have enough authority to be able to live up to the responsibility that they have. In other words, they have more responsibility for scope and for execution than they have authority over. And therefore, they need a sponsor. They need an executive champion who is going to partner with them so that the project manager can rely on that sponsor to remove organizational obstacles for the project. Okay? And for that reason, I would tell every organization that if they're going to make somebody accountable for project success, it ought to be the sponsor. Okay? That ought to be the person who has the authority to be accountable. Because if you don't have enough authority to be responsible for everything, how can you be accountable for it? So given that perspective on what should a sponsor be, I would tell you that the sponsor should have more formal authority. Again, in my opinion, should be accountable for project success, should be championing the project team, should be their ally, and should be removing organizational obstacles for the project. And it not necessarily providing funding. The customer funds the project. The sponsor is the ally for the project manager and the project team. And so what this often does with this, and as you can see, there's some, you're not all in agreement with me, but I want to emphasize my point of view on what a sponsor should do before we talk about how sponsorship can be promoted using SharePoint. So Kyle, thanks for running the poll. Let's get back to the session now. And after discussing what it is that I believe the sponsor should do, what I want to say now is that project manager and sponsor should be a team. The project manager spends a lot more time hands-on getting the project done, but the sponsor should be the one with sufficient authority to be accountable for the project's success. Therefore, those two should talk a lot. Now, the fact is they probably don't. And I think that there's a couple of reasons for that. One is the project manager, let's admit it, the project manager doesn't want to create a separate status report just to send to the sponsor, just so you can send an email to a sponsor who may or may not read your report, right? Let's be honest about that. On the other hand, the sponsor is often so busy, they feel like, you know, I don't want to sit down and listen to all the details of your project. So even though they know they're supposed to know about this project, you sort of get into a, well, why don't you just invite me in, you know, got an open door policy, pull me in anytime you have a problem, you know, and they end up being, you know, triage, just helping you resolve problems. Well, that's not really a partnership. So I want to present a different model here, which is let's be proactive about how the two work together. And the key here is making sure that the sponsor and the project manager have a basis for concise, frequent communication. So let's take a look at a sponsor view in your SharePoint, right? And I want to show you a couple of things here that your sponsor could be looking at. So if we take all the data that's in that we're using to manage a project, issues, risks, schedule, my current status report that I've written up for the project team, right? I can take all of that and filter it down and make it concise and put it in one place. And because it's all in SharePoint, the project manager doesn't do a single extra bit of work. They don't do a single extra bit of work, but they take SharePoint, the project sponsor's view of the project status, just grabs the most recent status report. What the sponsor sees in terms of the key tasks and milestones, you might have 50 tasks on your schedule, but they don't want to look at all of them. Well, which ones do they want to look at? Good. Just show them the ones that they want to look at. So we want to condense what the sponsor's looking at to the things that the sponsor just wants to see. Again, this is the way we use the term dashboard all the time, right? Just condense it all. So do they want to see issues and risks? You know, if a sponsor's doing their job, they need to know what the high priority issues and risks are. But you know what? Maybe they don't want to see all the issues and risks, because on a decent sized project, there may be a dozen or more issues, a dozen or more risks. And look, can't we just give the sponsor the view of the issues and risks that are either high priority or that are assigned to the sponsor? Okay? And so if you do that, using, again, my goal here is to promote maturity, but I think this is a great tool for doing that, because now you've created a communication habit where the sponsor can see fairly recent data, right? The most up-to-date information that the project manager has, without putting an extra burden on the project manager to create something that the sponsor may or may not read. Okay? And because it's focused and it's concise, my optimistic view is that the project manager and sponsor are going to be able to have focused, frequent conversations of high quality. And because they're focused and frequent and high quality, the sponsor will be predisposed to having more of those conversations. So, won't hail all problems. If you don't even think that I know what, if you don't agree with my view of a sponsor, maybe you won't think this is important. But I got to tell you that over the 20-some years of teaching and consulting in project management, strong management support for projects is always in my top 5 success factors whenever I poll any group of project managers. What makes a project success is strong management support. This is the way to build strong management support. All right, we talked about stakeholder management, stakeholder engagement. And again, I mentioned that stakeholders, rising in awareness of their importance in the project management world. So how do we typically do stakeholder management? Well, a quick and dirty process for you. Identify your stakeholders, understand their point of view. In other words, what is their stake in the project? Plan to keep them engaged. So you plan communication, and you follow the plan. In other words, you communicate as planned, and you monitor the key stakeholders. So what would we do with SharePoint here? Well, you already know that SharePoint gives people a lot of access to information, but I'm going to encourage you to say, look, let's keep track of what we are doing for our key stakeholders right here. I want to know who the key stakeholder is. I want to know their primary concern. And again, this is a fake project that's about a school district, just because we happen to work with several school districts. And so they might have a state Department of Education that their primary concern is that a district curriculum matches the state standard. And now, much like we did with our issues, I can open it up and look at what has been done and what I'm planning to do. So what's my last action and what's my next action? Those are going to be running. Those are not static. But as I update them, I have a history of it. So I have both a current view and the history view. Again, I think that's a practical, systematic, reasonable effort method of creating visibility on my stakeholders. And guess what? Most of my sponsors have certain key stakeholders that they want to see. They want to know the status of what's the last time we talked to, for example, the board, the local board of education, and what's the last thing we did for them, and what do you plan to do next? So I would add stakeholders to my sponsor view of the project as well. Now we're moving along pretty well here. We're 45 minutes through the hour. We've just walked through, wow, SharePoint. I can use SharePoint to promote a clear goal, schedule with clear responsibilities and due dates, risk and issue management, stakeholder engagement, and a strong sponsor-project manager relationship. You're thinking, holy smoke, Eric, this is like, you're blowing my mind here, but let's keep going. I want to keep blowing your mind, okay? Because what we talked about earlier was, we said we're going to focus first on executing individual projects well. But what about multi-project management? Okay? What about program management? Okay? So, some of you said you're using Project Server, which is similar to Project Online. So I'm just going to take an example of what you get with you use Project Online, which is basically Project Server hosted by Microsoft in the same way that you might get a hosted SharePoint, okay, outside your organization instead of inside. And let's take a look at what you might get for multi-project management if you had Project Online. Very briefly, okay. Now, first of all, what is it that we need to do multi-project management? And what we need is visibility. Okay, we need visibility on shared project resources. So what are the people or things that are being used on multiple projects? And secondly, we need progress across all projects, because to really do multi-project management, we have to see where are all of our projects. So let's take a look in using Office Project Online, which is a project server. This is a classic multi-resource view. And just to explain it for a moment, what we have is this example comes from a company that does a lot of has a lot of technology involved, and it's all unique technology. So they have 5 different labs that they use in their projects. Okay, so think of it as an R&D kinds of projects. And so they share these labs across projects. Now, of course, you could be a person, right? It could be a skill set, but in this particular example that we're using here, it happens to be the resource is a lab. How many hours a week are these labs being used? Well, as you can see, we've got different color coding for these various labs, and you can also see that the blue, the one that's labeled Lab 5, labeled blue, you know, in the last week of the period here that's being showed, is the only one being used. Sometimes it's being used a lot, sometimes it's being used a little, you know, and as with all the others. I got to tell you, you know, if I'm trying to manage shared project resources, whether that's people, whether that's you know, non-human resources that are applied to projects, having that kind of information, pretty useful, right? Well, that's why people use Project Server and Project Online. But let's take a look at what SharePoint might tell me. SharePoint does not give you that kind of visibility, but here's what it does give you. This is what I would see if I looked at my task list in SharePoint when I've been using SharePoint to assign myself to multiple projects. So I can be looking at all of the projects, all of the tasks that I'm responsible for. You see one of them here, Project D, I've got a task that's due tomorrow. And so you can say, take a look at what are all the things that I'm responsible for across projects. Now, that's not anywhere near as powerful as what you saw with Project Online. So now you see that this SharePoint is a simplified tool set, right? But still it gives you this multi-project view for an individual. And what's important here is that if each user can see task assignments across project, if I want to sit down with my boss and have a conversation about my workload, this is a pretty useful view, okay? Okay, what else do we want to see if we want to do multi-project management? We want to see progress across all projects. Again, Project Online, Project Server, they excel at this because what are they doing? As you look at this, every line here is a project. And so what you see here are groups of projects. And you can see who owns the project. You can see the budget for the project. You can see, and you can see that if you could scroll out to the right further, you'd start to see their schedules. There is an awful lot of data that can be consolidated and presented in a single view in Project Server, Project Online. Pretty powerful. How about SharePoint? What would I use in SharePoint? Well, in SharePoint, I would take that very same project schedule that you saw for the project, and I would bring it up, and I would have a page that showed all my projects on one schedule instead of, and it'd be much like using a single Microsoft project file to show only the high-level status of every project. So it's nowhere near as comprehensive, but on the other hand, for a lot of companies that I work with that are low maturity, again, low maturity, this is something they don't have now. So if you go from, I don't know what all the projects are that I have now, to I can see, I have a method of viewing that is accessible to anybody who wants to see it, or at least I can control access to anybody who I want to see this. And it can be, say, updated maybe every Friday or every Monday or some other period of time. At least I have that commonly viewed. So what's important to realize now about this is that Project Online gets automated updates from Microsoft Project. So Project Server, Project Online, there's a strong automated link populating the data from Microsoft Project up, and anybody who's using Project Server, Project Online totally gets this. But that's how it works. That's why it works. With SharePoint, it's all manual. Okay? So there's clearly a difference. All right, let's take it a step further. One more cool thing, because one of the cool things we like about SharePoint is that our whole team has access to it. So that if there's a project schedule in SharePoint, everybody can see it, everybody can update their own tasks, they can see what they're responsible for, they can tell you when they've finished something, and gives visibility and access to the whole team. And I like to promote that because it promotes engagement. But let's say that our project manager is pretty much a Microsoft project jock, like a lot of you folks, right? So look, a SharePoint schedule doesn't baseline. It doesn't calculate critical path. These are some of the critical things that you love about Microsoft Project. So if it doesn't do that, well, the project manager's thinking, I kind of like Project better. Well, the good news here is that you can synchronize your Microsoft project plan to SharePoint. Project manager can build the project plan in Microsoft Project, have all the Microsoft Project features that she likes, synchronized to SharePoint. Everybody on the team sees that in the same way they would see a SharePoint schedule, and they can still update and still have access to it. That adds a lot of value. It combines the collaborative value of SharePoint and, of course, all the scheduling value of Microsoft Project. All right. Let's put the pieces together before we run out of time, and I want to make sure we have quiet time for questions. So what did we talk about today? We said that habits are what make us more effective. Okay, so building consistency is the goal. Technology is critical to promoting good project management habits because technology is the way that we do the work. Okay, we took a look at the kinds of technology that we're using now. We started with a focus on project management. We acknowledge that Office and Project are very commonly used to practice project management. Okay? Then we saw that SharePoint can accomplish many of the same activities, but realize it isn't a complete replacement. What I'd like you to think of instead is SharePoint should be viewed as the starting point for promoting consistency. The simplicity that you saw today means that more people will actually do this thing, but it also provides enough structure and rigor that people will all do it in the same way. So it's simple, yet we can promote very sound project management practices. With SharePoint in place then, we can also easily grow in maturity, start to integrate. I got to tell you, people who are using Excel today to manage their schedules, who are going to start using that SharePoint schedule, will then move on to using Project at some point as their projects get larger. It makes sense, right? Which takes me to one of the reasons that at Versatile we're excited about the way SharePoint is going to change the way I think people move in terms of their project management maturity. They go from simplicity and increased consistency in the SharePoint environment, and as they want to build complexity and increase functionality and increase maturity up to using Project Online or Project Server, they can do that. Okay? And you don't have to leave it all behind. Within any organization, there's different complexity in projects. So it may be that in a mature organization, as many projects within, in the IT PMO, for example, or in the engineering group, it may be valuable to use Project Server, Project Online, but the less technical, less complex projects may never need to go there. They may be quite happy in the SharePoint environment. Okay? This gives any organization the full spectrum of what they need to do to promote consistency in project management. As you can see from the way that I've been talking, to me, that is the Holy Grail right there. It's consistency promotes maturity. So my goal today has been to show you this pot of gold in your backyard. Okay, the pot of gold in your backyard is the SharePoint that you already installed, that you already have access to, that you're not using. Okay, and you can start to do the things I've showed you. But for some of you, you don't actually have it. 10% of you said you don't have it yet, but you can have it, and it's because everything is available in the cloud. Office 365 for as little as $3 a month per user. You can begin to do what we've shown you today, and I think that's amazing, right? That's amazing. What it means is that the entire company doesn't have to switch over to SharePoint 2013 to start to get this capability. What we're seeing with a couple of our customers right now is they're saying, look, I got a couple of project teams that really need this. I'm going to get them up on this in the cloud using Office 365. And we'll just basically roll this out as needed instead of all at once. So they can. It's a realistic way to have two versions of SharePoint running in your organizations. Okay? So, again, if that's appealing to you, if that's something you want to know more about, you can certainly contact Versatile. We'll help you get connected there. We've been excited about everything we're showing you here today. I hope that's clear, that I think that SharePoint's a real opportunity. That's why we've basically put together the training to help anybody out there who saw this presentation and thought, that's kind of what we want to be able to accomplish. The training, the templates, that's why we put that stuff together. That's our business. So ready for any more questions. I know we've coming up to the top of the hour here. I've covered a lot of ground, but if there's any last questions as we get to the home across the finish line. I also want to say that if you'd like to get a summary of the presentation today, you can email that to email. You've got my email on the screen. Just send me an email. Say, hey, Eric, I'd like a summary of your SharePoint presentation today, your MPUG presentation, and I'll make sure you get a copy of that. We'll put together a few-page summary of that presentation.
Hi, Eric.
Yes.
Would you have any extra time to maybe go a little longer to answer some of the questions? There was quite a few that came in.
Sure. Let's go ahead. Let's start answering the questions, and we'll see where it goes.
Okay. I'm going to go ahead and send the PDU code out to everybody to let them know for the people that do have to leave here at 1 o'clock, and then we'll go ahead and start off with the questions here. First question was from Ron, and Ron asked, do you have to use SharePoint instead of Project to manage the schedule?
Yeah, good question, and I think I answered that question at the end is no, you don't. That's again one of the things I love about this system that Microsoft put together is I can choose and not and Ron can continue to use Project and I don't have to. If Ron's more capable at using Project, but I'm kind of like, nah, I like to keep it simple. I've got smaller projects. Good, we can each do it the way we want, but we can still integrate with SharePoint.
Okay.
Thanks, Ron.
Amy asked if there are templates within SharePoint or is it heavily configured on an individual basis?
Good question, Amy. So, Amy, what we've done is we've taken the tools that exist within SharePoint and built them into what you've seen here in terms of a project management focused set of templates. So the templates, if I were an expert in Six Sigma instead of project management, I could have built a Six Sigma template set for you out of basic tools that exist in SharePoint. So what you saw here is that we took the basic tools that exist in SharePoint, and I got to tell you that schedule is one of the basic tools, what they call web parts, that exist in SharePoint, and we've configured it into what we consider to be a strong method of managing projects. So it's a little bit of it's both, right? And if somebody likes our template set, we basically sell them the template set put into their SharePoint, but it takes advantage of the existing capabilities of their SharePoint. Thanks, good question.
Daryl asked, do I have to have Project Server to do the team member updating or just SharePoint?
Oh, you do not need to have Project Server to do team member updates. No, that's part of the what we like about SharePoint is everything I showed you how to do, you don't need Project Server to do. You just need SharePoint. And again, Project Server needs SharePoint to do it. So now you're starting to see that, oh, I see, kind of low end, less complexity, SharePoint should get my job done. Thanks for the question.
Let's see here. Does each project site have its own risk and issue log? Can it roll up to a portfolio view? And that's from Bruce.
Hey, Bruce, good question. All right, so each project site can have its own risk and issue log. Roll-ups, now you're starting to get complex. So if you're not going to get a SharePoint developer in, and again, you can do it, right? If you want it, you can do it. But if you're might need a SharePoint developer to start to build that roll-up for you, because as soon as you start to do roll-ups, the complexity of, well, how many things am I rolling up and from where are they rolling up from? And, you know, you can use Power Pivot in Excel, and there's a couple other tools available, but it starts to be not as out of the box as what I've shown you today. So what I've shown you today is more is a lower complexity, easier to implement, easier to use approach than anything that aggregates, that pulls from multiple projects, starts to cross that boundary of needing a developer, and maybe, you know, justifying a project server.
Ken asked, for those of us that don't have Microsoft Project Server but have Project Pro and SharePoint, can we still use the majority of the features that you were showing?
Absolutely. Everything that you've got, that I showed you, if you've got Project Pro and SharePoint, particularly SharePoint 2013, you can do an awful lot of what I showed you in SharePoint 2010, but the schedule is and is better in 2013. Thank you. Good question.
Can schedules created in part of the project server be viewed in SharePoint workspace in the same manner?
So schedules created in a project server. Boy, I actually don't know the answer to that question definitively. I want to say yes, but I will say that once you start to synchronize things in multiple ways, I mean, if you're using a project server, you don't need to build your project plans, then you don't need the SharePoint view to share the task list, because that's what Project Server provides. It provides that same capability for sharing, so you probably wouldn't do it that way. If you've already got Project Server, you don't need to share the task list the way that I showed you. You would do it through Project Server.
Okay.
Yeah, thanks.
Just a couple more here.
You bet.
Is there a way to use Microsoft Project with a resource pool in SharePoint?
No. That's the simple answer. And so, well, so think of it this way. You're trying to the schedule. So the resource pool issue, right, is the old is how do I get multiple projects to share a common resource pool? All of that stuff is I'm not, you know, is in lieu of using Project Server. That's what you're doing. If you want sophisticated multi-project resource views, Project Server is the tool. And so that's one thing. Be super clear about that. With SharePoint, what I can see is I can see who's assigned to things, but I don't really get that whole how many hours a week view of workload. So SharePoint is not that this managing project with SharePoint is not designed and not intended to replace that capability in Project Server, and that's exactly why you would continue to use Project Server, is that you want that multi-project view, and much like the view that I showed you out of Project Server. you can clearly see that gives you a lot more power. Project SharePoint, managing projects with SharePoint just won't do it. Thank you.
Okay, this will be the last question. For anybody that didn't have a question answered, you can post those on our on the MPUG discussion forum, or Eric's email's on the screen, so you would be able to contact him directly as well.
You bet.
Let's see here. Is there a way to create a graphical dashboard for a group of projects in SharePoint?
Well, that's, of course, there's a SharePoint and dashboards are made for each other. However, now you are entering the realm again of a little bit of development. So you have to ask, what is it that you want to know, right? And how do you want to aggregate that data? And has that already been accomplished using Project Server and Project Online? Because that's what Project Server does, right? It creates dashboards for projects. So you have to remember, the basic premise here is SharePoint is a platform. So you want to do it, you can do it. BI, business intelligence, SharePoint loves business intelligence projects. And there's tools in SharePoint, and you might start doing development, SharePoint development, if you want to do that. So when you start thinking, I want some multi-project dashboards, maybe Project Server, Project Online has those already for you, and that's really the best approach to do it, because remembering that Project Online and Project Server are built on SharePoint. So SharePoint can do a host of things, and we've only shown you some of them. These are the ones that I feel are most focused on promoting good project management. I know it's kind of a complex answer to a good question. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Eric, for presenting today, and we appreciate everybody that came out and watched the presentation. I did send over I chatted the link to our community survey, so we'd love to hear from you for anybody that hasn't filled that out yet. I also chatted over the PDU code for the webinar. Actually, the first one was incorrect, so please make sure you have the correct one. It's on your screen now, MPUG WebNLearn 041614. And then don't forget to join us for our upcoming WebNLearns. Get those up here. Diving deep into task dependencies with Tom Henry, and that'll be on April 23rd. And then also the upcoming certificate series, Project Online and Server 2013 Workflows. That'll be on May 21st and 22nd. Thanks again to everybody, and thanks, Eric, for the presentation today.
Hey, my pleasure. Thanks for joining us, everybody.